Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos. This block is Pinwheel square. It's 10-inch finished. Here's the diagram, and here are 4 blocks set block to block. It's one of those quilts that just has a lot of chaos in it, and I just love that for scrappy quilts. Patch A is a 2-inch finished square. We cut 2.5 inches. And we need 4 patches of the dark fabric and 1 patch of the background. Patch B is a 2-inch finished half square triangle. We cut 1 square at 2 7/8 inches and cut it in half diagonally once for 2 patches. And we need 8 patches of the dark pink. Since we need 8 patches, we're going to cut 4 of these squares, cut each one in half once, and you'll get your 8 patches. And we're not making half square triangles, so we're going to use patches. Here are the AccuQuilt dies for these 2. Now patch C is a 2-inch by 4-inch finished half rectangle triangle. So that means that there's a triangle takes up half of this rectangle. I've got 3 different ways you can piece this, and I'll show you the one for rotary cutting. For rotary cutting, we're going to cut 5.5 by 3 inches. For each of these, you'll cut it in half on the diagonal like this once, and you'll get 2 patches. We'll need 4 patches of the light pink and 4 patches of the purple. One thing to remember when you're cutting these, whether you're rotary cutting, AccuQuilt, or using the Tri-Rec tool, you need to have right sides of the fabric facing up because you want all of the rectangles to face the same way, and I'll show you that later. Patch D is a 4-inch finished quarter square triangle. We cut 5 1/4 inch squares, cut them in half twice on the diagonal, and we get 4 patches. We'll need 4 patches for the green and 4 patches for the background. So we'll need 1 square for the green and 1 square for the background. Here are the AccuQuilt dies you can use. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to lay out the pieces and show you how they're laid out just as patches, and talk about how you can look at a block and see what you need to do to make that block yourself. Here are the fabrics I've chosen. I've got my squares, the patch A. Here is patch B. This is patch C, and this is patch D. I've cut the dark half rectangle triangles. Now I'll show you how to cut the light ones because you have to go in the same direction. You'll have to follow the direction up here, that these are cut this way, if you want the half rectangle triangles to be facing like this. And I'll show you what that means. So I have the purple ones cut, and they are correct in the direction as on the sheet. When I originally cut the pink part, I cut them on a different angle. You see the angle in the diagram is going this way, from upper right to lower left. And I cut these from lower right to upper left. So you see they don't go together right. They're supposed to go together. So I had to recut them, and I was going to show you how I do that. If you get confused, just look at the picture and you'll see that this needs to be cut this way. So let's just take a ruler and make sure these are even, and these are right sides up. So the right sides are both facing up. And I have 2 pieces here, so when I cut it, I'll have my 4 pieces. Rotate this a little bit, but you can see how I'm placing this ruler on the diagonal and then just cut. Now we have our pieces that all face the correct way, and when we sew them together with the purple, that's what they'll look like. If you are rotary cutting these, I'll show you in a little bit how to piece these, because I added a little bit of fabric to these so you can piece them and then trim them down a little bit. I tried adding just the measurements that were on the electric quilt, and it was okay, but it was very hard. So I want you to be successful, so I'm going to show you the easier way to do it so you'll get accurate results, even though it's a little extra step. Now I'm going to lay these out so you can see where the patches go before we start. Let's start with patch A. I'll probably have to move this out of the way. So the A's go in the outside corners like this, and then we have one A left over that goes in the center, and you can get this all from the diagram. Then we have our patch B, and they go like this. They go on the side of either one of these and make a big triangle. Now we'll just put these in here now. So this goes like this and like this. And we'll put all these on. This just gives you a rough idea of how these will be put together. Now we need to fill in our triangles here with our quarter square triangles. So these will go like this and like this, and then all the way around. And I'm just looking at the diagram to see the patches and how they're laid out. Okay, so now you get an idea of what this block will look like when we piece it together. When I look at a block like this, I try to think, what do I recognize? And here I recognize these half rectangle triangles first. And that's why I put them as step number 1 on the instructions. So we'll do that, step number 1. Then I look at, these are out of the way, and then I have 4 squares in the corner. These all, when they're sewn together, will make one big square. So how does the square put together? And you can tell that it's like this because this is the easiest way to break it up and then put it back together. So you have these 2 quarter square triangles you'll sew together. Then you have these half square triangles you'll sew on either side of the square, and then you'll end up with 2 triangles you piece together. So that shows you how you can sort of dissect a block. If you see any block that you would like to recreate, this is how you go about doing it. This is a 10-inch block, and it has a grid of 5 across and 5 down, and each unit in the grid is 2 inches finished. So this is 2-inch finished. This right here is 4 inches finished. It's like 2 inches here for the square, and then this side is 2 inches. So you have 4 inches plus 4 inches is 8 inches, and 2 inches is 10 inches. And then you have the same thing coming down. So I hope that hasn't confused you even more, because sometimes I'm not explaining it correctly, but this is what you look at. When you see a block and you want to recreate the block, just kind of dissect it, take it apart, see what parts you know, and then the easy ones to do those first. So let's start with this. We'll start with step 1 now and sew these together. If you have used AccuQuilt to cut these, you'll have markings and little cutoff points that you can match when you put those together, and you just match those and sew 1/4 inch and press your seams open and you're done. The same way as if you use the tri-rec ruler, you'll have the little cutout corners. The corners will be cut off, so you can line those up and just sew 1/4 inch. But if you don't have an AccuQuilt, or you don't have a tri-rec tool or any other kind of tool, this is how you do these if you hand cut them. Some people call them hand cutting or rotary cutting. We're going to take the light one and turn it over. Find a ruler with 1/4 inch mark on it. What I'm going to do is measure 1/4 inch and draw a line. So I placed the ruler on the edge, and you see this dashed line is the 1/4 inch mark. I'm not going to leave it on the fabric. You see here how I can see part of the pink fabric is peeking out underneath that. Away from that, I'm going to put the line just on the outside edge of the fabric. What that gives me is the space I need to make the markings, because the pencil lead has some dimension to it, and if I place it like this and I draw my line, I'm going to have more than 1/4 inch. So I like to put my dashed line, in this case on this ruler, just outside the fabric, and then draw my line. Okay, so now that should be just under 1/4 inch. Now they're going to be sewn together like this, so let's flip it over. Now I'm looking at the line I drew, and it comes off of the fabric right here. So I matched this edge here, this edge on this side. Where this comes out of the fabric, I want it to be on the very bottom edge of the purple fabric, because when you stitch off of that, this is that little V sometimes you make. So I'm going to just put a pin in here. I don't normally pin it, but normally I do this at the machine. So let's put a pin right there. Then go up here and just line up this edge here, and you should be really close to this edge here is the edge of the fabric. It's not that close, but we're going to go with it and see what happens. You're going to stitch just along the line from here down to here. Here's the piece I just stitched, and I stitched 1/4 inch, which happens to be right on the line, but if you're off a little bit, just don't worry, because we cut these fabrics bigger so we can trim them down to the size we need. And you should start and end where those two fabrics intersect each other. Then we're going to press it open, and here's what it looks like pressed open. We'll cut off these nubs. Really, you just have to cut the nubs off of one side, the bottom part, or whatever side. And we're going to trim this down to 2.5 inches by 4.5 inches. Trim this down, this corner here where you clipped off the nubs. Make sure that you have a really nice point here, as close as you can get to that seam line being right in the point. And I'm going to lay it this way. Take my ruler, and the 2.5 is this way, and the 4.5 is this way. So I line up the 4.5 here, and then bring it down to the 2.5. It wants to move. Okay, so here's my 4.5 inches here, and here's my 2.5 inches. And make sure that this corner right here is right on that seam line, because that's what's going to be, when you cut it off, that seam line will be right at the edge of the fabric. So I'll trim off this and trim off this. Now we have our 2.5 by 4.5 inch half rectangle triangle, and do that for all 4 of your half rectangle triangles. That is step 1. Step 2, we're going to take one of the outside squares, the purple squares, and 2 of the B patches, the half square triangles. They'll go together like this. We'll take this one first. You see, this is the edge we want to line up. Flip this over, and you match these 2 sides, and then stitch on this side, 1/4 inch. Press your seams open. We've done all 4 squares like this, and now we'll cut off the nubs. They'll just get in your way, and we'll add the other one. Remember, we want to make a big triangle, so this is how they go. We're going to line up this edge here, so flip this over, line up this edge, and stitch 1/4 inch here. Press your seams open, and do that for all 4 of these. Next, you're going to take your D patches. This is step 3, so I always look at the picture and put the patch exactly how the picture has it, so it's like this. Here's our straight line. We want to flip these over, and you can line up all 3 edges for this. Stitch 1/4 inch here and press your seams open, and do that for all 4 of the units. We have our step 2 units done and our step 3 units done, and step 4 we're going to sew these together. They go together like this. Flip it over, match all 3 sides, and stitch along this long line. Where this fabric has a point, you want to match the point with this seam line here. So I use my pin, put the pin in the point here, like that, and then just eyeball or estimate 1/4 inch down on the seam line and put the 2 together. So we'll just even it all out and make sure the pin is perpendicular to the fabric. Put it in the fabric. Now match up all your edges and stitch 1/4 inch down. When you get to this point where the pin goes into the fabric, as you're coming to that point, just take the pin out slightly so it just has one part in, and then stitch right at the point there. Take the pin out all the way. Then you'll have a perfect point when you stitch the 2 together. All right, now we have our 4 corner units and our center units, half rectangle triangles, and our 1 lone square, patch A, left. We'll just lay these out, and the squares go on the outside corners. And these go like this. And now you have a 9 patch block. Sew these into a row, so we have 3 rows, then sew the rows together and the block is finished. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.